Hi guys, welcome to my channel. If you've never been here before, welcome, and if you are returning and you already have been here, welcome back. So today's video is not a tarot reading. I'm not pulling any cards or any oracle cards this time. This is going to be all about astrology. And if you've ever heard of a rising sign, also known as your ascendant, I'm going to break it down to explain what that is and why it's actually a lot more important than people realize. So for that, you would have to know your birth time. The rising sign changes every 2 hours, so it could, you would be an entirely different rising sign. Say you thought that you were born at 8 p.m., and it turns out that you were born at 10:30 p.m. after all. You could be a completely different rising sign, and the reason why it's so important is it sets up the roadmap for where all of your houses are gonna lie. If you've ever heard, your horoscope or talking about a synastry chart or your own natal chart, and they say things like, well, this and this is conjunct to your 7th house and your 3rd house this, and all this house stuff, and to most of you it sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo if you're not really familiar with astrology, and most people aren't. Most people don't know all of those details, but they open up so many doors to learn more about yourself and learn more about your friends, family, loved ones. If you're comparing your charts with a friend, or if there's a major astrological event going on in the sky and you want to know how it affects you, your houses play a huge role into that. Once you understand houses, it's a whole different dimension of this huge level of a different understanding. It sounded like a bunch of mumbo jumbo to me too when I first learned it. So I'll go through all of the different rising signs and explain where all of your personal houses are gonna lay and what it means for you. I'll also link in the description box below some free astrology sites where you can put in your information. And another thing I was gonna say, so if you don't know what your big three is, if you've ever heard of the big three, that talks about your sun, moon, and rising, and those three signs play a huge role in your natal chart. Those are where the strongest placements are gonna be. So sun signs is what most of you are familiar with based on your birth date, regardless of the year that you were born. And also a rising sign, like let's say that someone was born at 7:20 a.m., it doesn't mean that every single person born at 7:20 a.m. is going to be the same rising sign. It depends on the date, the year, all of that. It changes every 2 to 2.5 hours, and it's not consistently the same every single day. So that's why it's so particular to enter in your birth time. And also the moon sign changes about every 2.5 days. So if you were born on a day where the moon sign happened to change, that's really important to know your birth time for that reason also. Your other personal planets like Mercury, Venus, and Mars, those don't change quite as often as the other ones, so you can figure all of that out without having to know the exact time, usually, unless it happened to change that exact day. So anyways, we'll move on to each rising sign, where the houses are going to fall in those signs, and I'll timestamp everything in the description box below so that you can just go straight to your rising sign. So the first sign of the zodiac is Aries, so we'll start with our Aries risings. So your placements for your houses are going to line up in the exact order of how the signs go. Now, these are really sloppy drawings of the zodiac wheel. I felt called to do this, so don't mind the crappy writing. I should really get a dry erase board for things like this. That'll be my next thing on my list. So anyways, so if you look at the zodiac wheel, hopefully you can see this. So the way that it goes is, so Aries is your rising sign. Whatever your rising sign is going to be your first house, and then the rest of the houses go in order of the zodiac wheel. So we've got your first house is Aries, so Taurus is next, right? So that would mean that Taurus would be in your second house, Gemini is in your third, Cancer fourth, Leo fifth, Virgo sixth, Libra seventh, Scorpio 8th, Sagittarius 9th, Capricorn 10th, and Aquarius 11th, and then finally Pisces would be where your 12th house is. Now you can pause the video, write all of this down. You could probably find out where your houses are on astrology sites, but I'll break it down as to what they mean. So that being said, so let's look at your own chart. Let's pretend that your moon is in Scorpio, for example. So that would mean that your moon is in your, so Aries first house, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. So that would mean that your moon falls in your 8th house. The moon represents emotions, and then the 8th house represents all things that are Scorpio related, that Scorpio type energy. It's real easy for Aries risings because they land where they go, right? So on an emotional level, you have a lot of depth. For example, you're always going through some type of transformation, and that's how you develop emotionally, is by transformation. That's how you gain emotional strength. And that's just an example. Your sun, for example, let's say that your sun is in Leo. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be in your 5th house. So the way that your ego is and the way that your self, naturally would be, and anybody that's a fire rising, everything is going to be amplified because the houses lie in something that makes sense with it. So Leo has to do with, that energy has to do with play, creativity, a childlike innocence, sensitivity that's well hidden under jokes and humor. So that can be a huge highlight of, kind of who you are in general. And I was going to add, looking up rising signs of famous people to give examples of, what are Aries rising people like? What are Taurus rising people like? But I've noticed a lot of inconsistencies. I would look up celebrities and it would say Aries risings are so-and-so. And then I would find that same celebrity under Gemini rising and Taurus rising. So then it's not accurate, and I don't feel like I'm giving the correct information. Consistently though, Shaquille O'Neal, Rihanna, and Shakira are Aries risings that are 3 famous people right off the top of my head that didn't change with the signs, that seemed consistent. So whatever, general aura that they carry, that might give you a clue as to, what you kind of are in general. The rising sign is more than how you come off. So it's just a general guide of where your houses are going to fall based on your rising sign. So we will move on to our Gemini risings next. Oh, I'm sorry. Taurus risings next. If I could get it straight what order goes in what. So if you are a Taurus rising, I'll show you where your houses are going to fall. You can pause the video, write it down. Astrology sites will tell you, but I'll give you the general breakdown of where your houses are going to fall and what it means for you. So the general rule of thumb is every rising sign, whatever your rising sign is in your first house. And then you go around the zodiac wheel in order, where your first house would start on Taurus because it's your rising sign. So Taurus would be your first house, second house Gemini, third house Cancer, fourth house Leo, fifth house Virgo, sixth house Libra, 7th house Scorpio, 8th house Sagittarius, 9th house Capricorn, 10th house Aquarius, 11th house Pisces, and 12th house Aries. So I would say, for example, so the third house has to do with communication. The third house is represented by Gemini energy, not to confuse you. So your third house is in Cancer. So you're more of a soft, gentle communicator. You're very practical and down to earth. You come off as very chill, and you're a really gentle communicator, for example. Also a protective communicator, but it takes a lot to get you to that point where you would snap to stick up for another person. But when you do, you mean business. So Cancer represents the moon, all things motherly, all things nurturing, your roots, your family structure. So that it's tied in with your communication style. So let's say that your moon is in Scorpio. That would mean, so if Taurus is your first house here, so your second house would be in Gemini, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Yeah, so Libra would be in your sixth house. So you may be one of those people that really looks out for your partner's health or friend's health. The loved ones around you, you look out for their health. So the sixth house represents health, attention to detail, growth, represented also by Mercury, because it's associated with things that are Virgo energy. And Libra, that has to do with partnerships, balance, how you get along with other people. So you might be kind of one of those people that's like the mom of the friend group, or that's how you come off. And that's just an example. So whatever sign your moon or whatever planet falls in, the house that it would be in, you can count from Taurus being the first, going all the way around the wheel, and that would tell you what house that planet falls in. You can also use it for horoscopes if you know there's a major astrological event coming up. For example, Saturn moving into Pisces on March 7th. So that would mean, and it's huge because it's been in the same sign in Aquarius for the last 2 years. Saturn has to do with responsibility, karma, authority. As you could tell, what was happening 2 years ago? What was attention brought to? So you've got authority, right? And it's in the sign Aquarius, standing up against the man, questioning things, seeking truths on your own because something just doesn't seem right. Yeah, so you can see how all the energy is, and now that it's moving into Pisces, that kind of goes into the psychic realm. I'll explain how that goes. So if your rising sign is Taurus, going around the wheel here, that would mean that Pisces would be in your 11th house. So there could be an energy having to do with your friends. 11th house is represented by your social circles, friends, and communication. And with Saturn, being represented by responsibility and authority, you might be noticing who's responsible and who's not when it comes to people in your social circle. I mean, nobody's gonna judge each other. We all have our different things going on, but if it's to the point where it's draining you or inspiring you, you'll see which way to go. With all horoscopes, astrological events, if you know where your houses are and you line it up against what's happening, that can really tell you a lot. Apparently, some Taurus rising celebs are Mariah Carey and Mr. Rogers. That one kind of threw me for a loop because I don't see where the common denominator is. I like to look at groups of people that are all in the same sign or same rising sign, or compare it to celebrities. What common denominator is between the people? Maybe you might have an answer. I really don't, as far as what they have in common goes, but So that pretty much says the general gist of what's up with Taurus risings. I hope this made sense for you. We will move on to Gemini risings next. So Gemini risings, I'll give a brief overlay of where your houses are going to fall in your chart, and what that could mean for you. You know, how you explain the houses, which sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo if you're not familiar with astrology. So, Gemini risings. So the way that you figure out where your houses lie is your rising sign is always, that's where you start with, that's your first house, and you go around the zodiac wheel in the order of the signs. So Gemini is your first house. So then next would be Cancer. So Cancer is your second house. I can already tell you that you value home and family. I mean, most people do, but I think that you're particularly one that really demonstrates that. So then your third house is Leo. The third house is represented by communication. And Leo is all about that fiery energy. You know, you can be loud, boisterous, laugh a lot, and people really need that sunshiny energy, so keep on keeping on with that. So Virgo would be your fourth house. The fourth house has to do with the moon, the mother, family, your ancestors. I would say that you probably come from a pretty down-to-earth family. You were taught to be down to earth. You were taught to not be dramatic, and, you know, you're pretty chill because of your, you know, and your upbringing had a lot to do with that. So Libra would be your fifth house. The fifth house represents pleasure, the way that you have fun, your hobbies, creativity, and Libra energy has to do with partnerships, harmony, the way you come together with others, whether it's a relationship or friendship. You seem to have the most fun when you do things as a group. You like to plan group things, you know, having fun, getting people involved, making others feel included. Your sixth house falls in Scorpio. I would say that when it comes to health matters, you're very private about it. The sixth house has to do with health, attention to detail, and Scorpio, it's kind of more of a private, to themselves sign. So I would say that you keep to yourself as far as health matters go. Let's see, Sagittarius, making sure I'm getting this in the right order. So Sagittarius, that would be your seventh house. I think that you take an approach to your relationships in more of like a fun monkey shines, teasing each other kind of way. I mean, that's not all that there is to it, but you're one of those people that likes to tease your partner. I mean, I am too, and I don't think that that's where my seventh house is. I mean, isn't that the whole point of having a significant other, to tease the living shit out of them? I mean, all in good fun, of course, not, you know, in a mean way. I mean, if you can dish it out, just make sure you can take it, of course, and as long as you're a good sport too, no harm in that. So your eighth house falls under Capricorn. I would say a serious, conscientious worker. Capricorn has to do with abundance, career, responsibility, the way that you handle your ambitions. And being that it falls in your eighth house, the eighth house is kind of hidden, just like Scorpio energy. It's pretty hidden, it's pretty private. You tend to work on your projects alone and to yourself, and you don't really like to show your cards right away. When it comes to your responsibilities, you just do it, and that's it. You don't really talk about your goals, you don't really say what you're gonna do, you do it, you're done with it, and that's it. So Aquarius falls under your ninth house. The ninth house has to do with wisdom, expansion, travel. It's Sagittarius energy. So I would say that, since your 9th house is under an air sign, you're pretty lighthearted and spur of the moment when it comes to the way that you like to travel. And when you learn new things, you just happen to stumble across it in the right place at the right time in fated situations. So Pisces, that falls under, that's your 10th house. I would say that you've got a lot of compassion. I mean, a lot of people do. Your 11th house falls under Aries, so the 11th house has to do with your friends, your social circle, if I could talk, your social circle. And just like the same way that you have, Leo in your communication style in your 3rd house, you've got that fire, you've got that fun. You're usually the fun one in the group with the good ideas. And then finally, your 12th house is in Taurus. I would say that you're pretty down to earth as far as your spiritual thoughts go. And you're not real showy as far as spiritual beliefs go. That's kind of a thing where you're to yourself. The 12th house deals with all things that are spiritual and usually metaphysical areas. And I'm not always in depth and in detail equally with all the rising signs. I just kind of let fly out whatever's going to come out pretty much. So I apologize to the other signs if I didn't cover as much as I did in another sign. And then a few Gemini rising celebrities, sometimes I get different conflicting answers about who's a famous whatever sign. Gemini rising celebs are Drew Barrymore, Will Smith, and Mick Jagger, just to name a few. I'm not sure what the common denominator with their energy is, or if any of it makes sense to you, Gemini risings, but that might kind of give you an idea of what the Gemini rising energy is like. So we'll move on to my Cancer risings. So if you are a Cancer rising, I'm going to give you a breakdown of where your houses are going to lay. You can pause the video, write it down. There's free astrology sites where it'll tell you where all your houses go. So the general rule of thumb is wherever your rising sign is, that's house 1. Your rising sign maps out where your first house is. So if you're a Cancer rising, that means your first house is Cancer. And then you go around the zodiac wheel in the order to see where your other houses are going to be. So your first house is in Cancer, your second house Leo, and your third would be in Virgo. Your fourth would be in Libra, your fifth would be in Scorpio, your sixth would be in Sagittarius, 7th house Capricorn, 8th house Aquarius, 9th house Pisces, 10th house Aries, 11th house Taurus, and finally your 12th house would be in Gemini. So that being said, let's say for example your moon is in Leo. So that would mean that, being that Cancer is your rising, so that means that would be where your first house lies. That means your moon is in your second house. That's if your moon is in Leo. Wherever your moon is, whatever house that's in, that we'll talk about, take the house. Now, the second house represents all things that are Taurus, your values, represented by the planet Venus, all things aesthetic, the senses. So if your second house is in Leo, that means that you handle your values in a very Leo-y type of way. So you might be spontaneous with your money, for example. That's kind of how you break it down with what it means to have certain planets in different houses. You can use it for like a horoscope for major astrological events that are happening. A big one that happens on March 7th, Saturn moves into Pisces after being in Aquarius for the last 2 years. Saturn has to do with karma, responsibility, authority. So Pisces for you, if you're a Cancer rising, that would be, so that's your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. So Pisces falls under your ninth house. And, you know, things that, as far as responsibility goes, and the ninth house represents travel, expansion, wisdom, I think that a lot of you might be seeing the value in taking a well-deserved vacation, possibly. That type of energy is going to be highlighted for the next 2 years as, you know, Saturn moves into Pisces in March. Just a general idea of how you can use that knowledge of knowing where your houses are going to lie. And I do plan on getting a dry erase board. That would have worked out a lot better. And I couldn't think of any examples for Cancer rising celebrities, but you could have just Googled Cancer rising celebrities, get an idea of what, you know, if you have a group of people, of what they all have in common, and see if there's a general theme of the energy and how it relates to you. So next, we'll move on to Leo risings. All right, Leo risings, if I could talk. Leo rising, so I'm going to do a brief overview of the general idea of what being a Leo rising is like, what it could mean for you, and I'm going to go over where your houses in particular lie. People talk about, oh, your moon or your Venus is in this house and that house, and when you read horoscopes, this is moving into your whatever house. This is going to give a general breakdown to figure out where your personal houses lie and how you can use it universally for your knowledge. So it doesn't sound like a bunch of mumbo jumbo. You won't even need to look at horoscopes. You'll be able to figure it out yourself, like if you really study the houses more. So a general rule of thumb is your first house, where your houses start, your rising sign is where it starts, and then you move around. Am I going the right way? Okay, it goes this way. So on the zodiac wheel, in the order that the signs go, your rising sign is always where your houses starts. Your rising sign is your first house. So then you go around the wheel. So that would mean your Leo is your first house, your second house is Virgo, your third is Libra, your fourth is Scorpio, fifth Sagittarius, sixth Capricorn, seventh house Aquarius, eighth house Pisces, ninth house Aries, 10th house Taurus, 11th house Gemini, and finally your 12th house is in Cancer. I apologize for the sloppy drawing of a general zodiac sign wheel. I should really get a dry erase board, but whatever, I felt called to do this, so I worked with what I had. So anyways, so Leo is where your houses begin. Let's just, get some examples. So let's say that your moon is in Cancer. Okay, so to figure out what house your moon is in, so the moon has to do with how you process emotions and the deep down underlying, undercurrents of what's going on emotionally. So let's say that your moon's in Cancer. So going around the wheel and counting, that would fall under your 12th house. So that would mean that, so now the 12th house deals with all things metaphysical and all things spiritual. So that could possibly mean that you handle emotions because it's in Cancer. You're very protective, you're nurturing. That's that Cancer energy, but also the 12th house is represented by Pisces energy. And 12th house deals with all things metaphysical and spiritual, so if you're heavy in your emotions, you could think thoughts to yourself subconsciously, what, I'm really depressed and I don't know why, I wonder what this means spiritually, like emotionally, you're trying to always make that connection between emotion and spirit. Just as an example, or say that your Venus falls in, let's say, Gemini. So Gemini's kind of it's represented by duality, communication, and for you that would fall in your 11th house. That could mean that you treat your romantic partners like kind of like a friend, but not always in a bad way. Like, you have to be friends before you can be involved romantically. Something along, that's just examples. That doesn't mean it's you personally, unless your Venus happens to be in Gemini and you are a Leo rising. Just giving examples. You can use it to think of your own horoscope in a way. For example, a major astrological event that's happening soon on March 7th, Saturn moves from Aquarius into Pisces, and it's been in Aquarius for the last 2 years. So, being that it goes into Pisces, if you're a Leo rising, that means that would fall in your 8th house. You count, the 8 signs. The 8th house has to do with all things hidden, things that are taboo. 8th house is represented by Scorpio energy. So possibly, maybe some secrets might come to the surface. You might see through somebody's bullshit, something like that, for example. And it doesn't have to be, but if you know where your houses lie and you're following the astrological events, or if you pay attention to the changing of the moon signs or where the lunar nodes are, that's huge. And look at what houses it falls under for you. All you have to do is see what sign it's in. Like, say you come across an article, oh, the North Node moves into Aries in July, which is true. That's what's going to happen in July. The North Node moves into Aries. The North Node is about what lessons we're trying to learn. For you, Aries falls under your 9th house. If you count throughout the wheel in order of how the signs go, that falls in your 9th house. So besides that Aries energy and lessons to be learned that are all things Aries, individualism, your sense of self, the you do you type of energy. It's also represented by travel, wisdom, and expansion. And a little bit of the third eye where you're seeing where everything's all interconnected. That could say that you may gain wisdom through travel. Anyone can do this if they study what all the houses and everything means. Like, you just line it up with what's happening astrologically, and you can find out your own stuff and personally what it means for you. I mean, I can do it for people. You can look at horoscopes, you can read articles, they are helpful. It doesn't hurt to gain a little extra knowledge, but when you understand what all the signs represent and what all the houses mean and where your houses lie, you can figure out anything. You can figure out the general energy of what's going to happen with your friends, what's going to happen for you. Oh, how did you know that? With having a long time of studying this stuff, it's like it comes naturally, second nature, and it will to you if it's something that you like to study. Oh, that's another thing. The 9th house is also represented by higher learning. So I think a lot of you are going to learn a lot this year. And that's all I can think of for Leo risings. Oh, another thing, because you're a fire rising sign, all fire risings, because of where they are and where their houses are going to lie, fire risings do everything with passion and guts and, high energy. That's just fire risings in general. I just thought I would throw that in there. So we will move on. Oh, let's see if there's any. So famous Leo risings. Now, when I looked up celebrities of different rising signs, I get conflicting information. But off the top of my head, I know J-Lo is a Leo rising. I want to say Justin Timberlake might be. So if you look at celebrities or friends of yours that you know that all are from, that have the same rising sign, same this or same that, and get an idea of the general energy that they have and how they carry themselves, that's a good indicator of how to see the patterns of all the different rising signs. So we will go ahead and move on to my Virgo risings next. Hi there, Virgo risings. So I will go over a brief overview of where your houses lie if you're a Virgo rising, and the general rule of thumb to determine where your houses are. You can use it to create your own horoscope based on different energies going on with astrological events, where your planets are. You can use it for so much. So the general rule of thumb is, so if you're a Virgo rising, wherever your rising sign is house 1. So you're a Virgo rising, your first house is Virgo, and then you go around the zodiac wheel in order of how the signs go. Don't mind my crappy little drawing. I should really get a dry erase board, but I felt called to do it, so I got together what I had. So your first house is Virgo, and then your second house would be Libra, third Scorpio, fourth Sagittarius, fifth Capricorn. Aquarius would be your sixth. Your seventh house would be Pisces. Aries would be your eighth house. Your ninth house would be Taurus. Your 10th, Gemini. Your 11th house, Cancer. And finally, your 12th house, Leo. So, let's say, for example, your moon is in Cancer. Doesn't have to be, but just giving an example, or whatever sign your moon is in. So the moon represents emotions, how you handle emotions, the deep underlying currents of how you operate on an emotional subconscious level. So let's say your moon's in Cancer. So you would count around the signs, or you can do it in list format, whatever is the easiest way to go about it for you. So Virgo would be the first house. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So as I said before, Cancer falls under your 11th house. So the 11th house has to do with your social circle, friendships, a little bit of communication. I would say that, let's say that you're a Cancer moon, and, with that 11th house, you're definitely emotionally sensitive. You are protective, because Cancer is that protective mother energy. Also loves food, loves comfort, has to do with your ancestors, your roots. You could be thinking, why am I feeling like this? Well, what did my great-grandma say when this is going on? You often think things like that. And maybe, like, you tend to be mothering towards your friends. You think of your friends like your children. Maybe you're the mom of the group. Or you could be more lighthearted emotionally. Like, even though it's in Cancer, and that's a, very emotional sign, maybe it balances it out, because the 11th house is, part of the air element, just as an example. And also, you can use it for astrological events, like on March 7th this year, Saturn moves into Pisces after being in Aquarius for 2 years, so that's a pretty huge, major event. Saturn has to do with responsibility, karma, authority, and Pisces happens to fall in your 7th house, I believe. So partnerships and friendships could be highlighted for these next couple of years. It also can represent relationships, but if you're one of those people where, you're just fine by yourself and you're not in a relationship, don't plan on being in one, it just has to do with partnerships and the way that you relate to others. So That's the gist of it for Virgo risings and where your houses are gonna lie. And you can find all of that out on a free astrology site, but it's nice to have a visual of how it works. And if you get into this enough, not that you have to, but you can find out just about anything in the general energy of a situation. Also with friends, oh, so and so's moon is in, let's say, this sign in Capricorn. So that person's moon would fall in your. So Virgo, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that person's moon falls under your 5th house. Oh, no wonder you have so much fun with this person and, you're free spirited and, happy and fancy free. Things like that. You can use it for synastry, friendships, relationships, horoscopes. I mean, it's just all across the board. Good knowledge to have of where your houses lie. So next, we'll move on to Libra risings. If you're a Libra rising, so the general rule of thumb is wherever your rising sign is, that is what your first house is going to be in. And then you go around the zodiac wheel in order of the signs, and that shows you where your other houses lie. So Libra, that's house 1, because that's your rising sign. So then your 2nd house would be Scorpio, 3rd house Sagittarius, 4th house Capricorn, 5th house Aquarius, 6th house Pisces, 7th house Aries, 8th house Taurus, 9th house falls under Gemini, 10th house Cancer, 11th house Leo, and finally your 12th house would be in Virgo. So let's say that your moon is in Virgo, for example. That would mean that your moon is in your 12th house. The moon represents how we handle emotions. The 12th house represents ends of cycles, metaphysical things, the spiritual realm. So that would go to say that because your moon, represented by emotions, is under a very spiritual house, that might mean that the way that you process emotions is spiritually. Oh, I'm really sad, I can't figure out why. I wonder what that means spiritually. What's going on with spirit or God or the universe. And that's just an example. And you can also use it to determine your own horoscope. For example, on March 7th, Saturn moves into Pisces, and it's been in Aquarius for 2 years. So Pisces for you, Libra rising, would fall under your, if you count. So 1st house, 2nd house, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. So Pisces would be in your 6th house. That has to do with attention to detail. It has to do with your health, growth, abundance, and communication, because it is connected to Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury. So that being said, in Saturn, because it's moving into Pisces, Saturn has to do with karma and responsibilities and authority. So you could be handling your responsibilities when it comes to your health. That's just an example. Let's say that you've got a friend or a potential, romantic partner. Your rising sign is Libra. Let's say that their moon falls under, let's say they've got a moon in Capricorn. So that would be in your 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th house. The 4th house has to do with the home, has to do with all things nurturing. So you could be drawn to this person because they feel like home to you. You can find out so much when you know where your houses are gonna lie, and if you know where the other person's houses lie, if you know their rising sign and their chart and all of that. You can find out where your houses are on free astrology sites, but having the visual and having it broken down and explained, that's helpful. So I hope that made sense for you, Libra risings. We will move on to my Sagittarius risings. And I just realized that I went from Libra to Sagittarius and almost skipped Scorpio risings, so we're actually on Scorpio risings now. So for you Scorpio risings, I will give a brief breakdown of where to determine where your houses are going to lie. You can use it to find out how certain astrological events are going to affect you. It's a map of, the general energies that are going to rule over your personal chart. You can use it in synastry, also known as compatibility with friends, lovers, how you get along with other people, finding out how your own self works within your own chart. I would start there. That's a good place to do it. So the general rule of thumb is, had a piece of hair in my face, sorry. So the general rule of thumb is wherever your rising sign is, that's where your houses start. That's always house 1. You're a Scorpio rising. House 1 is Scorpio for you. And then the houses go around the zodiac wheel in order of how the signs go. So that would mean that your first house is in Scorpio, your second house is Sagittarius, your third house is Capricorn, your fourth is Aquarius, your fifth is Pisces, sixth house Aries, seventh house Taurus, eighth house Gemini, ninth house is Cancer, 10th house is Leo, and finally, I feel like I'm missing something. So your 10th house would be Leo. No, 9th house Leo, 10th house Virgo, 11th house Libra. No, your 12th house would be Libra. See, it's hard to see this backwards on camera when I'm looking at it like this, trying to show you how it is. So it would go 1 through 12, so your 12th house would land on Libra. So, for example, let's say that your moon is in Leo, you're a Scorpio rising with your moon in Leo. So that would mean counting your first house Scorpio, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th. So that would mean that your moon is in your 10th house. I would say that even though you have a fiery, bubbly personality with that Leo moon and you're the comedian, you also handle your emotions in a very practical manner. The 10th house is represented by Capricorn. Capricorn rules growth, responsibility, abundance, strong work ethic. So it's almost like your moon, and the moon has to do with how you process emotions. So that being said, it's almost like you process your emotions in a way where it's a cross between a Leo and a Capricorn, if that makes any sense. Let's say that you've got a friend that has a Pisces moon, and you want to know where their moon lies in your houses. So Scorpio is the first house, so first, second, third, fourth, fifth. So the Pisces moon, their moon falls in your 5th house. So you guys are lighthearted, you have fun together. As far as emotions go, you don't take things too seriously in a grumpy way. You enjoy each other's company. That's just one example. With that moon, or rather Saturn, moving into Pisces on March 7th after it's been in Aquarius for 2 years, it's a pretty significant event that would fall under your 5th house. So for the next couple of years, you may be getting into some creative projects, learning different ways to have fun, lightheartedness, all that happy stuff. So that's a brief, general overlay of what it, where your houses are going to lie if you're a Scorpio rising. I hope that made sense for you. One thing about Scorpio risings is they have very intense eyes. There's something about their eyes that are very... Scorpio rising eyes stand out. So, If somebody's just got those mesmerizing eyes, there's a good chance they may be a Scorpio rising or have Scorpio in their big three. That's a common denominator I've noticed with Scorpio energy. Not trying to be weird, but it's just something, accumulated knowledge of patterns that I've seen. So next, we'll move on to Sagittarius risings. If you are a Sagittarius rising, this will be a brief overlay of where your houses lie and the general manner in which you carry yourself. So, being that it's a fire sign rising and the way that your houses lie right off the bat, you move through life with passion and vigor, and yeah, I'm laughing if you're lazing on the couch like, yeah, right, I'm being a couch potato, I see you with those snacks, and you're not sharing, Anyways, see, the way that I just acted sarcastic like that, that's Sagittarius rising humor. Can you tell I'm familiar with the energy? If you have people that are close to you that have a common astrological setup going on, it's real easy to predict what the energy is like. So, the general rule of thumb is wherever your rising sign is, that's where your houses start. And then you count going all the way around the zodiac wheel in the order of how the signs go. So if Sagittarius is your rising sign, that means that that is your first house. Your second house would be Capricorn. Your third house would be Aquarius. Your fourth house would be Pisces. Your fifth house would be Aries. Your sixth house is Taurus. See, it's hard to read backwards. It shows up backwards to me. I hope it showed up the right way on your end. Seventh house Taurus, I think I said. Eighth house Gemini. Ninth Cancer. 10th house Leo. 11th house Virgo. Nope, I got it mixed up. Let me start that over again. So your first house would be Sagittarius. That's where the houses begin. So first house Sagittarius, second house Capricorn, third Aquarius, fourth Pisces, fifth Aries, sixth Taurus, seventh Gemini, eighth house Cancer, ninth house Leo, 10th house Virgo, 11th house Libra, and 12th house Scorpio. Alright, so let's say, for example, your moon is in Virgo, just using it as an example. I'm too lazy to count. Why don't we just say that your moon is in Aquarius? You're a Sagittarius rising with an Aquarius moon. So you count from where your first house is, which is your rising sign. So first house, second house, third house, that would mean that your moon falls in your third house. So the moon is represented by emotions, or that talks about how you process and handle emotions, and more of things on a subconscious level, the underlying things. So third house rules communication, all things Gemini related. It's ruled by Mercury. So that's saying you ain't shy about emotional expression. As an example, on Mars, you can use it in a horoscope type of way. You don't even have to look up a horoscope. If you know where your houses go, just match it up with the signs of what's happening. For example, March 7th, Saturn moves into Pisces after it's been in Aquarius for 2 years, so it's a pretty major astrological event. Saturn is a lot happier in Pisces than it is in Aquarius. I just shook the camera, sorry. So that being said, so Pisces would be your first, second, third house, no, fourth house. So Pisces being in your fourth house, and with Pisces being the sign that's involved, the fourth house is represented by all things Cancer, the home, the family, things that may have to do with your mother or a mother figure, all things nurturing. So over the next 2 years, Saturn ruling responsibilities, your responsibilities, may have to do with things involving the home. You could be taking on some other responsibilities that have to do with something involving your mother. It rules ancestors, your roots, where you came from. Maybe you're looking at the history of your ancestors and maybe they took up a certain hobby or an occupation, and you're deciding to take on some responsibilities to follow in their footsteps. It doesn't have to be, but that's just an example. And you can find all this information of where your houses are going to lie on free astrology sites, but it's just nice to have the visual, my sloppy visual. I just felt called to do it. I didn't feel like waiting to get a dry erase board, and I was at home. All this stuff popped into my head. I'm like, let's do it. We're gonna draw everything onto a hunk of paper, so it's sloppy, but it gets the point across. Alright, Sagittarius risings, I hope that made sense for you. I hope, you get use out of this information, and, it's pretty cool stuff. So next we'll move on to my Capricorn risings. Hello there, Capricorn risings. So I will be giving a brief overview of what it means if you're a Capricorn rising and give you an overlay of where your houses are gonna lie. You can use having that knowledge of where your houses are, you can use it to get an idea of your own horoscope. You can use it for compatibility, synastry, getting an idea of how you process things, and how your own chart comes together. So the general rule of thumb is, so now if you're a Capricorn rising, wherever your rising sign is where your houses start, and then you move all the way around the wheel in order of how the zodiac signs go, and that's where your houses are gonna lie. So if you're a Capricorn rising, your first house is Capricorn, and then going around the wheel, your second house is Aquarius, third house Pisces, fourth house Aries, fifth house Taurus, sixth house Gemini, seventh house Cancer, eighth house Leo, ninth house Virgo, 10th house Libra, 11th house Scorpio. I feel like I missed something. Oh no, 12th house Sagittarius. So let's say that your moon is in, let's say Cancer, for example. So counting around the wheel, that would mean that your moon is in your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th house. Your moon is in your 7th house. The 7th house represents Libra energy. So if you have a lot of Cancer placements and you're a Capricorn and there's no Libra in your chart, and you act like a Libra and you're thinking WTF, well, that might be why. Because you have a lot of 7th house placements, and it's which is, even though it's in Cancer, there's a lot of Libra undertones to it. So the moon represents emotions, how we process our emotions. You don't like if you're a Capricorn rising with the Cancer moon, you most likely don't like to be alone. You're nurturing. You have that protective mama bear instinct going on. You're fairly gentle, and you handle everything in a Libra-y kind of manner where you're also a social butterfly, and you think that things are best done as a team. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people like to do things like kind of be a lone wolf. You're not one of those people that's a lone wolf. You're one of those people that, the time goes faster if you're having fun. Completing a task together would be your mentality, and that's if you happen to be a Cancer moon. That's just an example. You go with what house it's in, and the sign, and your emotional energy, because the moon is emotions. That'll give you an idea if you do it across between the sign it's in and the house it's in, and that'll give you a brief overlay of how you handle things emotionally. Jupiter, for example, let's say your Jupiter's in Sagittarius, that would mean going around the wheel, starting with your first sign being in Capricorn, counting to, that would land in your 12th house. So Jupiter, expansion. Jupiter has to do with wisdom and expansion. And the 12th house represents all things spiritual. It's represented by Pisces energy. So you handle wisdom and expansion and your generosity in a spiritual manner somehow. Like you just kind of combine the energies that way. And on March 7th, Saturn, which represents responsibilities, karma, authority, it moves from Aquarius into Pisces. So Pisces would fall in your 10th house. So things could be highlighted, responsibility with work matters, responsibilities with saving your money. Maybe your major focus is abundance and how to retain it, how to save it, where to invest it. So Capricorn risings, generally pretty much no BS, very practical, as most earth sign risings are, and where your houses are gonna lie. Very matter of fact. A lot of them have very dry humor. If you don't know them that well, they might come off as grumpy, but once you get to know their humor, oh man, it's one of a kind, and it's really hard to replicate, because good luck saying what they say but keeping the same straight face that they do. If you're a Capricorn rising and you have a dry sense of humor, drop a sarcastic comment below. Well, that pretty much sums up what I have for Capricorn risings. So next we will move on to my Aquarius rising. Hi there, Aquarius risings. So I'm going to give a brief overlay of what it's like to be an Aquarius rising, what this could mean for you, and especially telling you where your houses lie. That's what determines your houses, is your rising sign. So the general rule of thumb of how to figure out where your houses are. So whatever your rising sign is, you're always going to have your first house as what your rising sign is. And then you go in order around the zodiac wheel to determine where your houses are going to lie, in the order of how the signs go. So Aquarius, this would be your first house. Your second house would be in Pisces, third house Aries, fourth house Taurus, fifth house Gemini, sixth house Cancer, seventh house Leo, eighth house Virgo, ninth house Libra, 10th house Scorpio, 11th house Sagittarius, and finally your 12th house in Capricorn. So how to, figure all this out. So the houses 1 through 12, each house, like the first house, because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, it represents Aries energy, self, individualism, Gemini, communication, for example, which rules the third house. So that being said, this is an easy way to figure out what all that house business means. So you're an Aquarius rising. Let's say that your moon is in Aries. So that would mean that starting with house number 1 being on where your rising sign is, so Aquarius would be your first house, and then second house, third house. So that would mean that your moon is in your third house. What does that mean for you? So the moon rules all things involving emotions, and this is given that your moon is in Aries. If it's in another sign, it's in a different house and you can put it together, but just to give you an idea of how to figure out your stuff. So third house, that has to do with communication. It has to do with duality. Aries, which is the sign that your moon is under, that's all about fiery energy, the go-getter. So that could mean that, you're a fiery communicator, you're very high energy, being that the third house rules communication. So the way to figure out how you process emotions, the moon is about emotions, Venus is about love, relationships, friendships, and harmony. Whatever planet it is that represents the aspect of life you're trying to figure out about yourself, like Mars represents energy and drive. Let's say that your Mars is in Cancer, for example. So being you're an Aquarius rising, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that would mean that Mars is in your 6th house in Cancer. The 6th house is represented by all things health, all things detail oriented. It's Virgo energy, it's Mercury. So being that your Mars would be in a water sign in Cancer, you kind of keep your emotions to yourself. You're like the silent protective one. And being that it's in the 6th house, you might be observant of the people around you and their health. For example, you might be passionate about health. Mars has to do with passion, courage, energy. So you take the planet, wherever your planet is, the combination of the sign and the house that it's in is going to give you a general overlay that tells you a lot more than just knowing that your Mars happens to be in Cancer, your moon happens to be in whatever. The house gives a whole different additional energy to it. So the Saturn on March 7th moves from Aquarius into Pisces after being in Aquarius for 2 years. So you're an Aquarius rising, so that would be your 1st house. So that would mean that Pisces would be your 2nd house. So Saturn will be moving into your 2nd house on March 7th, and it's going to stay there for the next couple of years. Your 2nd house, that has to do with your values, what you value in relationships, what you value in friendship, aesthetics, has to do with Taurus. It's ruled by Venus, so that could be your highlight for the next couple of years. That's an example of how to find out how certain astrological events are going to affect you, what sign it's going to be in, and what house it's in for you. Alright, Aquarius risings, that's all I have for you. I hope that was useful and it broke some things down. You can find out where all your houses are going to lie on astrology sites that are free and on YouTube, and what all the different houses represent, but it's nice to have the visual to explain how it works, so I hope you got some use out of that. Next, we'll move on to my Pisces risings. Hi there, Pisces risings, my artistic, creative, intuitive ones. So, I'm going to give a brief overlay of what it means to be a Pisces rising, where your houses lie. That's so important. If you're looking at your charts or someone else's charts, or trying to figure out a horoscope for yourself, or finding out how is a certain astrological event going to affect you personally. The reason why horoscopes are based on your rising sign is because that has to do with where your houses are going to lie. So the rule of thumb to figure out where your rising signs are is, so whatever your rising sign is, yours is Pisces, that is what's going to be your 1st house. Your houses start on your rising sign. Then you go around the zodiac wheel, or list format if that's what you prefer, in order of how the signs go. So Pisces is your 1st house. That would mean Aries is next. Aries comes after Pisces. So Pisces is your 1st house, Aries is your 2nd, Gemini, Taurus is your 3rd, Gemini is your 4th, Cancer is your 5th, Leo is your 6th, Virgo is your 7th, your 8th house is Libra, your 9th is Scorpio, your 10th is Sagittarius, your 11th is Capricorn, and finally your 12th house would be an Aquarius. So, and you can find these, you can find that information on free astrology sites And you can even look up meanings of what the different houses represent, but it's nice to have the visual of how to determine where your houses lie and how to look for things in your chart and predict how an astrological event is going to affect you. That's how they make horoscopes. So that being said, let's say that your moon is in Cancer, you're a Pisces rising with a Cancer moon, just to explain. So that would be in your 5th house. So that would mean your moon is in your 5th house. The moon represents how we handle and process emotions. You can do that with any planet. Venus is partnerships, romance, friendships. Mars is energy, passion, drive, sometimes anger. So you take, wherever your planet is in, and that's how you're going to handle the type of energy that planet represents. So the moon, emotions, the underlying, the undercurrent of how you handle things subconsciously on an emotional level. Cancer happens to be ruled by the moon, so it's harmonious in that sign. Cancer represents the mother, family, nurturing, your roots, the home. But the 5th house, which is ruled by Leo, that has to do with, pleasure, creativity, all things artistic, and a lot of things can be an art, pleasure, childlike innocence. So what you do, a good way to figure it out is the way you handle things emotionally is a cross between the sign that your moon is in and the house that it's in. So if the 5th house has to do with Leo, it basically, in a nutshell, means you handle emotions in a way that's a cross between a Leo and a Cancer. Or you can use it in synastry and compatibility. Let's say that you've got a friend or partner, whatever. Let's say that their moon is in Gemini, for example. So that would mean that their moon falls under your Pisces is the 1st house, so 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So that would mean that your friend or partner's moon falls in your 4th house. The 4th house is represented by Cancer, which has to do with the home, family, the mother or mother figure, nurturing. So you guys, may be emotionally nurturing to each other. You might enjoy their familiar feeling energy because they feel like home to you on an emotional level, or you feel like home to them. Just an example. And another thing with predicting astrological events, so a big one that's coming up, March 7th, Saturn, that has to do with karma, responsibilities, and possibly authority. It moves into Pisces after being in Aquarius for 2 years. So that is a pretty significant event. And if your rising sign is in Pisces, that's your 1st house. The 1st house has Aries energy to it. It has to do with the self, the you do you type of energy, your self-worth, how you view yourself, knowing when you need to be selfish, which I think for Pisces rising people, that's a big one. Since it's moving into Pisces for the next 2 years that Saturn is in Pisces, you are going to learn how to be much more responsible with maintaining that you do you energy that you need to keep. You're going to learn not to let people walk all over you. You're going to take responsibility and accountability for your tendency to maybe be kind of a doormat. I don't know what other way to word it. I mean, we all have our things that we're trying to evolve and work on, and it's all about growth. Life is all about growth. So that might be a highlight for you as an example, focusing on yourself and giving to yourself versus burning yourself out, trying to pour from an empty cup, giving too much to other people. There's nothing wrong with giving to other people. That's a great quality to have. Compassion is priceless. However, we all need to give that love to ourselves that we so willingly give to others. So Pisces risings, I hope that made sense for you. I hope everyone has a great night and a great rest of your weekend. And I hope that broke it down and gave a good explanation to how to determine where your houses are going to lie and how you can apply that to compatibility, horoscopes, pretty much anything. When you have that skill and you understand how it works, it's fire. Like, you can go anywhere with it. Well, have a great night and thank you all for watching.